The Mayor, Bruce Smith, Pat and Bill, distinguished guests, veterans and service people, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you here today in celebration of those who have served in our stead to protect this sovereign land and the people who came before us. We are gathered here to acknowledge the efforts of those soldiers who fought for and with the New Zealand Army in all past conflicts and the sacrifices our nation has made in the defence of freedom and the international rule of law. We do not seek to glorify war, but we can recognise the courage, commitment and sacrifice of those who have served their country well and with honour and pride. For a substantial portion of the years since the first Anzac Day, New Zealand has been involved in wars, conflicts and other military operations around the world. 70 years ago today, New Zealand soldiers were with their Australian, Canadian and American comrades engaged in the Battle of Kapiong in South Korea. Before the battle, the New Zealanders and Australians had been looking forward to a joint Anzac Day parade that would have involved Turkish troops. Instead, they were in the thick of battle, writing a new and gallant chapter in the Anzac saga. At about midnight on the 23rd of April, Chinese forces had begun a series of fierce assaults on positions held by the 3rd Battalion of the Royal Australian Regiment. Desperate fighting ensued over the next 2 days. New Zealand's 16th Field Regiment provided vital fire support to the hard-pressed Australians. Without this fire, there is no doubt the Australian infantry would not have been able to hold off attacks by the much stronger Chinese forces. As on so many battlefields before and since, at Kapiong, Australian and New Zealanders proved once again that in extremis they could always rely on each other. There can be no doubt that our nation's role in the Korean and in other wars and conflicts has had a tremendous impact on New Zealand's history and society. Above all, the terrible losses suffered by our country at Gallipoli and on so many other battlefields brought grief and loss to homes across New Zealand. Military service and war has had many other subtle impacts on our country. A few weeks ago, it was the 75th anniversary of the arrival in Japan of J-Force, New Zealand's contribution to the British Commonwealth Occupation Force. The men and women of J-Force carried out their occupation duties in a humane and professional manner. More importantly, however, the contacts they developed with the people of Japan helped lay the foundations for the multifaceted and warm relations that now link our two nations. One remarkable element of this process was that a few years after a terrible global conflict, some New Zealand soldiers and Japanese women were able to put aside the prejudices and enmity of war, fall in love and marry. In more recent years, the Defence Force has been involved in a wide range of operations overseas in places as diverse as Timor-Leste, Afghanistan, Iraq and South Sudan. Over the last year, at any one time, around 1,200 of our military personnel have been playing a key part in New Zealand's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Work in managed isolation and quarantine facilities has put a great strain on the personnel involved and on their families. What all these operations have demonstrated is the importance of the unique range of skills and capabilities that the New Zealand Defence Force brings to the service of New Zealand. They have also shown that today's New Zealand military personnel, like those who have gone before them, are dedicated to upholding New Zealand's national interests and the principles that we hold dear. Today, on Anzac Day, we also acknowledge that this modern service, just as it was in the past, is never without cost to our men and women in the armed forces and to their families. Thank you.